Brought to you by Penguin.
Death of an Ordinary Man by Sarah Perry. Read by Lydia Leonard. For Rob. This writing has to do with some things I saw, felt, and was part of. David Jones, in parenthesis. Part 1. Life. My father-in-law, David, who'd soon begin to die, was waiting by the donut stand on Yarmouth seafront when he saw a woman dressed something like a fairy entertain a little crowd with tricks. It was the end of summer. The day was fine. The shining tide was going out. The girl at the donut stand didn't know what she was doing, or didn't care, and really the fairy's tricks were too distant to make out. But David was a patient man, and had no idea time was short, so he was happy to wait and watch. Robert, my husband and his son, was waiting with him. They were men who enjoyed themselves easily, with a determination to see the best of things. Serve them a bad meal and they'd only say what a treat it had been, and almost persuade themselves it was true. So they cheered at the fairy when the crowd cheered, and laughed when the crowd laughed. Their hands were in their pockets. They looked alike. They walked with a similar gait. Nobody would have taken them for anything but a father and his son. I'd wandered away from them to stand in a temper on the shore. I was in the dissatisfied and shiftless state that always settles on me when I've finished a novel, and am faced with what I've done and failed to do. This had made me irritated by the fairy and the crowd, and even by the men, both of whom I'd loved most of my life. So I stood sulking alone, where the sea withdrew from the sand. But when I heard the girl call that our doughnuts were ready, I ran to pay for them, and took them over to the men in a scalding paper bag. We'd had fish and chips for lunch, and the doughnuts were misshapen and small, but all the same David ate 4. They gave him pleasure partly because they were delicious and hot, and partly because they put him in mind of holidays in Yarmouth 40 years before, when Robert was a happy and solitary boy who played hours of crazy golf and read second-hand books in bed. David's false teeth were broken, and this made it difficult for him to eat tidily, so bits of doughnuts were gathering in his clothes with scraps of the fish and chips he'd eaten earlier. He wore tan-coloured trousers that never needed ironing, and a cotton jacket zipped against the sea wind. He had beautiful white hair, which had grown thin only late in life, and showed in tufts under a baseball cap that was badly frayed at the peak. His face was round and snub-nosed, and he was prone to eczema. When he smiled, which he did often, he had dimples. He was clumsy with his hands, and because of this the lenses of his glasses were always smeared, and I worried he saw the world through rising mist. Lately he'd taken to wearing beautiful handmade shoes, and these were curious against the polyester hems of his trousers. When he finished the last doughnut, he rubbed cinnamon sugar from his fingers and pressed his shoulder briefly against mine with a familiar, affectionate nudge. "Excellent," he said. "That was excellent." Now the sun was going down. Gulls were screaming over the shuttered doughnut stand, and the fairy was collecting money in a plastic cup. "It's getting on," I said. "Yes," said David, and looked at me with shy expectancy, because we were going to the circus at the Hippodrome, and he'd seen the tickets in my pocket. He knew the circus well from his holidays in Yarmouth over the years, and often he'd said I should see the famous stage that in the interval would sink by several feet and fill with water. "Yes," he said, "off we go," and laughed. He was always laughing, with a kind of private delighted chuckle that was sometimes difficult to account for. But that afternoon I knew it had to do with the shabby stage disappearing under water, and the circus girls in their soaking costumes shedding sequins in the pool. I took his arm. I looked again at the sea. In the dusk, the shine was gone from the water, which looked now like a bolt of dull grey cloth. But I'm not sure David noticed, and it didn't occur to me.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?